Hey guys, I'm SB Communications. Welcome to my review of The Horror Show, which is also known as House 3. As you can see, this is the DVD that I have. I don't have the Scream Factory the Scream Factory Blu-ray DVD release because this is the most closest to the uncut version of the film you can get. Sadly, you only get it on a UK DVD. DVD from overseas. And make sure you get this one because this is the one that has the film pretty much uncut. Not totally uncut because there's scenes that are totally cut out of the film that there's still photos of, but that's it. And it's really bullshit that this was not released on DVD and by Scream Factory. And the reason why, it's not Scream Factory's fault. It's MGM's fault for being a bunch of fucking assholes. I don't know what the problem is. I know a friend of mine, Matt, Rambo Rat for Life, posted the uncut electric chair scene from this DVD on his channel a while back. That got blocked by MGM, and it makes me wonder, like, what? MGM, what? Really? You haven't even released this in the U.S. So what's the bug up your butt? Where is the, take the stick out of your ass and beat yourself over the head with it. Maybe they'll beat some sense into you, MGM. Because this movie deserves better. And after seeing this uncut version, because for the first time last night, because the first time I saw this movie, I wasn't really impressed, and I think that's because I had done a marathon of other similar movies like Destroyer with Lyle Zato and Shocker, and then I went to this one, so it was like really repetitive, like it's another electric chair killer movie. But this time around, I watched this more than a few days after I saw Shocker. And I thought, since I mentioned the film when I did the review of Shocker, I thought, why not watch The Horror Show again and watch the uncut version? And that I can watch because I have a region-free player. If you don't have a region-free player, you're kind of screwed. This is just pretty much a paperweight, but you probably could play it on your computer. I've noticed that. If you have VLC Media Player, you can play region-free, you can play whatever region DVDs on your computer. I don't know about Blu-rays because I don't know how that would work. But I thought the quality was all right. It was fairly good. It was perfectly fine, I thought. And anyway, the movie and the picture quality anyway of the film, but the actual quality of the movie I thought was really good actually. Watching this movie again without any sort of past memories of other movies with similar elements really did help my enjoyment of the film. And yes, it's also known as House 3, as you can see on here, House 3, The Horror Show. But that's just because for some reason the studios didn't trust the title Horror Show translating and doing well overseas, so they changed it to House 3, and it didn't really help it much at all, because the movie still was sadly pretty much a flop. It really did not make barely any money, if anything at all. Sadly, I mean, it only made like $1 million in the box office, which is really lame. And but yeah, The Horror Show, it's I'd say in a way it's even more underrated than Shocker. I'd probably say I like Shocker a little bit more than The Horror Show, but after watching this again in the version closest to the version as it was intended to be seen, I came away being pretty impressed with the film. And I think even more impressed when you find out that the original director, David Blythe, the director of Death Warmed Up, which is actually a pretty interesting movie in its own right, it has a decent amount of problems. But the original director, David Blythe, he ended up getting fired early on into the production. And director James Isaacs was hired last minute by producer Sean S. Cunningham because, James Isaac was available, and James Isaacs agreed to do the film. James Isaac, not Isaacs. James Isaac. And I thought James Isaac did a really good job directing the film, considering that he was hired at such a short notice. And the film was the only connection really has to the House franchise is the producer. Sean S. Cunningham produced House, and you also have another connection. You produced House and House 2. And then you also have a little bit of a connection too, because the cinematographer of the film, Mac Alberg, was the same cinematographer from the House films. And Mac Albert did a great job of cinematography in this movie. There's some really great bits of atmosphere in this movie. Very creepy. Did a great job with the shadows and the light and everything. He did a good job creating like a sort of very haunted, creepy, haunted house aspect of the film. And there is a house, and there is sort of a haunted house aspect in the film. So I guess you could say it's somewhat related to House, the House franchise. And it also has a score by Harry Manfredini, who also did the score for House. And I think his score for this is really underrated. He did a really good job with the score for this movie. And it's really a shame it was never released. And it's written by Alan Warner, who he changed his name to the pseudonym Alan Smithy because I guess he wasn't happy with what they did with the script. I don't know why. I think the script is really one of the better films of its ilk, one of the better jobs of its ilk. To the script, and it also was co-written by Leslie Boehm. And the film stars Lance Henriksen as the main character. And Lance Henriksen is really excellent as Detective Lewis McCarthy. And if you're a big fan of Lance Henriksen and you haven't seen the horror show, you should definitely give it a look sometime. And if you can find this version, this is the best version to see. But if all you can find is the theatrical version, okay, all right, it's there. But the uncut version, trust me, adds a lot more to the film and a lot more impact because you realize the true brutality of Meat Cleaver Max. And speaking of Meat Cleaver Max, Max Janky, is played by Brion James, and he does an amazing job in this role as Max Janky, in my opinion, as a serial killer who killed like 110 people with his meat cleaver, and including 7 police officers. And this character is very intimidating. Brion James is a very intimidating presence enough as it is because he's this really tall, big guy. And his performance, you could tell he was enjoying himself. He had fun. He was intimidating when he needed to be. He's scary when he needed to be. And at the same time, also humorous. A little bit of black humor when he needed to be as well. Really came away being really impressed by the 2 leads, Brion James and Lance Henriksen in this film. And Brion James even said in interviews prior to his unfortunate death that this was his favorite role that he's done. And yeah, it's really too bad. Brion James, yeah, he's no longer with us. He passed away in 1999, and may he rest in peace. Always really liked Brion James. I remember he was in Tango and Cash. He played a lot of villain roles. I remember he was General Monroe in The Fifth Element. Um, he served in the Army with a friend of his named Tim Thomerson. They served in the Army together, and they made several movies together. And I also remember him in Steel Dawn with Patrick Swayze. And yeah, the horror show was his personal favorite role. Was his role in the horror show as Max Janky. And yeah, may he rest in peace, Brion James. And so then you also have Rita Taggart, who plays Lance Henriksen's character, Lucas's wife. And I thought she did a solid job too at playing Donna McCarthy. That's Donna. Donna is actually Donna. Yeah, Donna is his. Yeah, Donna is his wife. Yeah, I was getting confused with Deedee Pfieffer there for a second, but no. Definitely. Yeah, his wife is played by Rita Taggart. I thought she did a really solid job. His daughter is played by Deedee Pfieffer. She does alright as Bonnie McCarthy. Aaron Eisenberg, who I remember, he plays. I remember him the most as actually of all people. I mean, not necessarily remembering him the most as all people, but I remember him in Amityville 4. I think that's the same actor, Aaron Eisenberg, who plays Scott McCarthy. Yeah, he's in Amityville: The Evil Escapes. Is Brian Evans, the same year as the film that came out the same year as a horror show. So I remember him as one of the kids from Amityville 4: The Evil Escapes. Thom Bray plays Peter Campbell. Thom Bray, he's been in a few movies here and there. Like he was in the horror show as Peter Campbell. He was in Prince of Darkness as a character named Etchison. He was in Deep Star 6 as Hodges. Yeah, he played the... Yeah, he was in Deep Star 6. That's what I remember him for. He played the scientist guy, and with the kind of nerdy guy in Deep Star 6, and he plays Peter Campbell, the scientist who's has this theory of that when a killer is electrocuted with an electric chair, it releases this negative energy into the world, and he becomes sort of a second life, so to speak, for the killer. And I like that idea. I like that premise, and that actually separated itself from Shocker. Brion James's character, Meat Cleaver Max, he didn't just jump from body to body, hidden style with Shocker. He just became sort of an entity, and he possessed the house that Lucas McCarthy, Lance Henriksen lived in, and then he went on to, he'd travel, his evil energy would travel from other places and so forth, but it wasn't, and he could take people into the other side with him, and he could like manipulate reality and so forth, but it was definitely a lot different than Shocker. There's a few other actors. Matt Clark plays Dr. Tower, who is Lance Henriksen's psychiatrist. I like the little bits of time that he had. David Oliver plays Vinny. Terry Alexander plays Casey, which I believe was his partner. Yeah, Lance Henriksen's partner before he... So yeah, his partner Casey got really, really messed up by Brion James in this movie. He got both his arms chopped off, and then he dies in Lance Henriksen's arms. I mean, it was really, really... I think it was a pretty intense scene. And actually, that scene is not in the theatrical cut. The theatrical cut, that scene is just... You just see him already dead. But in the uncut version, you actually get to see the scene where he's still alive while his arms are severed, and he's giving his last words to Lance Henriksen, telling him to get janky. And Louis Arquette plays Lieutenant Miller, and you also have Lawrence Tierney, who plays the warden, who might be somewhat familiar. He's been in, Reservoir Dogs, and he was also in Prizzy's Honor and The Naked Gun. And anyway, pretty solid cast. And so the basic gist of the plot deals with the character of Lucas McCarthy, played by Lance Henriksen, who's trying to hunt down this serial killer named Meat Cleaver Max. And I like how the beginning of the movie is actually a lot of build-up. It's a lot of build-up. It's a lot of atmosphere. And you just see Lance Henriksen walking around his house. Really great lighting. Really creepy. Well done. The house itself is a unique-looking house they use in this film. And so he goes in, and he's going down the stairs. He's got his gun. And he goes in the basement, and he looks in the furnace. And then he has a flashback to the events of Meat Cleaver Max's capture. And I thought it was really well handled. A lot of the flashback scenes I thought were really well done, especially the way they were edited. The editing was I thought was really tight by Edward Anton. And so you have a little bit of flashback stuff. You find out where Lance Henriksen's teaming up with his partner, trying to go get Meat Cleaver Max in this foundry somewhere. And I think it's a foundry, or it's a electric. It's like a place where there's like I think it's an electric plant actually. So they go in and try to chase after you. He's at this electric plant. There's like a kitchen or whatever area that leads into the plant, and this type of stuff is only in the uncut version. Only on this DVD are you going to see some of the scenes I'm going to describe here, which really make that sequence extremely more effective than in the R-rated version. And in this sequence where he has his flashback, before he goes in and splits up with his partner, and I like some of the lines of dialogue he has with his partner, where he's like, "I'm going to nail that son of a bitch, Jakey. I'm going to nail him," and of course his partner Casey's like, "I don't know, man. He killed those cops, man. I don't know. Maybe he's something else. If he's not, I don't know. He's out of his world. He's not. Dude, he might not be." And I like how Lance Henriksen replies back. He's like, "He eats and shits like the rest of us, doesn't he?" He's like, So it's like we eat some shits like the rest of us. So so then I'm gonna go into the kitchen. You go in through the back. So he goes into the kitchen, and he sees in this that there's a lot of deleted scenes. I mean, not really, not necessarily. Well, they're cut, so that you could say they're deleted. Um, when Lucas walks in, and into the kitchen area, he hears some noises, and then he comes back, and then he is looking back slowly into the room, and he sees two legs rotating in a meat grinder, and that was really shocking, really well shot. Cinematography, the lighting was very dark and very dingy and really well done, added to the mood immensely. And right off the bat, you're like, "Ooh, this is brutal." You don't see that. That's not in the R-rated version. And then you can see him a little bit earlier, where he walks in to the rest of where the fry cook area is, and then he lifts up this there's something in the fry cook, the cooker, and it's a severed head. And I guess you can see that in the R-rated version, but blood actually splatters out of an eye hole, out of the, and on the severed head on the uncut version. You don't get that in the unrated version. And then later, that you get the focus of Lucas and his partner with his separated arms, and that begins earlier. And then also in a scene where he thinks he had a dream. It's a dream within a dream, where you get to see the creepy image of Brion James in drag, chops. He hits Lucas in the chest, the meat cleaver. You can see him Luke that scene earlier with an axe in his chest, and then yeah. So pretty much after all of that, I like that way that's set up. He's having a flashback, and really what it is actually a dream. He's dreaming, and he's he starts choking what he thinks is the killer, Max Meat Cleaver Max, but it's actually his wife. So he wakes up and he's choking his wife, and she's like, "Hey, Lucas, Lucas!" It's like you're dreaming. It's like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry." So I actually like that little bit of drama. I like that aspect that he's going to counseling after he captured him, and because he was trying to save this little girl, who ultimately he couldn't, because Meat Cleaver Max chops off her head. It's pretty messed up. And they don't make movies like that anymore. You're not going to see that nowadays in the theater. Never. Chopping off a little girl's head, not happening. And anyway, maybe a direct-to-video movie, but not in theaters. Not in the mainstream. But anyway, so what happens is he has his dream, and then it pretty much cuts to really tense, a well-done electric chair sequence where Max Janky is being put in an electric chair, and Max Henriksen is watching. And this scene is a lot longer. This has not necessarily a lot longer, but has a lot more gore. It's a lot more effective. You can see his face pumping itself up even more. His veins burst. You can see his face again, bleeding. You can see more viewers getting disgusted by his face that's bursting open. And then you see his fingers slowly bursting too. And this is the type of stuff you don't see that in the R-rated version. And I like the performance by Brion James in this. They electrocute him at first, and then he gets back up. The doctor is testing his heart, seeing if his heart's still beating with his stethoscope. Then he wakes up. He's like, "All that did was give me a hard on," and then and they're like, "Turn it up all the way, yeah!" It's like, "Give me some more juice." Ah! Yeah, and then like they just turn up all the way. He's like bloody, like his face is exploding, and everything. He's lighting on fire, and he actually breaks out of his bonds, and he's walking slowly towards Lucas, and really, that was really well done scene, really tense sequence. And then he's all like, "Lucas, I'm coming back to tear your world apart. I'm going to fuck you up." And then he finally dies. And then you find out through this theory that Peter Campbell has that he's not really dead. He even actually sees his evil spirit leave from the body and fly away, go away into the world. And he's trying to tell Lance Henriksen about this, and Lance Henriksen thinks he's crazy. He's like, "What are you doing? Like, get away from me!" And it's like, you gotta get, you gotta get your wife and kids. He's coming for you. He's coming for your family. Don't talk about my family. So it's a really, I like that a little bit. So, of course he's skeptical. I would be too. Like, fucking energy and shit, whatever. Really, what? He's coming back. He's dead. The motherfucker is dead. And then, on his way home, Lance Henriksen, he's driving home, and he has another flashback to what's going on with, of course, in between this, he has meetings with the psychiatrist, and his psychiatrist signs off, so he can go back to work do his detective work. And but then he has this sort of flashback going on while he's driving. He almost gets in a car accident, and he stops, and then Brion James, Meat Cleaver Max shows up in his car. It's like, it's just beginning. It's like, then he tries to hit him, and then he disappears. And then the rest of the film is Meat Cleaver's Mac's spirit actually possesses the house, and he starts doing this kind of crazy stuff that's going on, electrical, surges and so forth. The character Bonnie, played by Deedee Pfieffer, she has a boyfriend, and Vinny, that's hiding in the basement. And actually, Brion James's character actually ends up killing him, but he hides the body and whatever until the right opportune moment, in order to basically ruin not ruin his life, but basically to ruin Lucas's life, Lance Henriksen's character, by making him a prime suspect in the murder of Vinny. And so it's become sort of this sort of psychological sort of thing. Is Lance Henriksen going crazy? Because a lot of his family thinks he's nuts. He's watching TV. We had this really weird sort of scene where he's having turkey dinner, and the turkey comes to life, and it has this. It looks all demented and weird, and it has the face of Brion James on the head of it, and it's all talking with the squeaky voice, and saying stuff like, "Don't look now, but your family's dead." And then he looks, and then they are like throat slit sitting in the table, and it's like, just kidding. And then he stabs the turkey, and then his family's like shocked. I'm like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "I just don't like turkey." Yeah, I just hate turkey. But he does like turkey. He does. It's one of his favorite dishes, but not this type of turkey. And originally, I didn't like Brion James's laugh in this, but I didn't mind it this time around. I thought it was eerie. I thought it was fine, actually. It doesn't sound like Peter Griffin now when I watched it again. It really doesn't. It sounds more like Dr. Giggles, and I like Dr. Giggles. Dr. Giggles is like, it's more like, it's kind of like what it is, like, so I didn't mind it. I don't think it was that bad. It was definitely weird. But I didn't really find it that laughable this time around. And so anyway, you have stuff like the turkey scene, and then he has another hallucination, or really what it is, it's just Max Janky, altering reality with his force, and this evil force. And he's watching TV, and his family's watching this stand-up comic, and they're really laughing, but he's really not that funny. So I don't know why everybody's like, ah ha ha ha, like, this guy sucks. But anyway, what they're watching is a stand-up comedian, and like Henriksen, before he can get into it and laugh with the rest of his family, he starts seeing Max Janky instead, and he's having his whole comedic show. It was like, my doctor came in and said I'm a psychopathic maniac. I'm like, yeah, take my wife, and slaughter her, please. Ha ha ha. Yeah, it was like really bad sort of, puns you would hear like in a Tales of the Crypt episode. But I thought that scene was well done because it showed sort of what kind of psychosis he's going through and what the rest of his family would be thinking. They would be fearing for his safety because then he pulls out his gun, points it at the TV, and then his wife is like, oh shit, and covers her kids, and then he shoots the TV set. And then, of course, now things are getting really serious. And then you find out that the whole thing with Vinny, his body actually shows up. That's a scene that actually is in this that actually had more to it. His body was actually cut in half, and there's a still on the Japanese VHS cover, Japanese box cover art. Yeah, of all things, a Japanese cover, and one of the Japanese VHS tape boxes that shows that sequence. It shows a shot of Vinny's body cut in half, and it's just insinuated that he was cut in half in the film. So that scene isn't actually in the movie. There's another scene that's not actually in the movie. Two scenes actually, even in the uncut version. The close. That's why I said closest to the uncut version. Two more. There's a birthday scene with Bonnie's having a birthday, and that's another photo that's on the Japanese VHS cover, Japanese VHS box cover art, and it's this birthday cake that's bleeding, and you really never really Bonnie's birthday is never really mentioned in the entire film, so it's probably just a scene that was entirely cut out by the because the MPAA are being a bunch of assholes. Another scene is where you actually see this, where this is actually a little bit later in the film. I'll actually get into that later. But anyway, Vinny's body is found, cops are called, and Lance Henriksen is getting accused of killing Vinny. And I like this sequence where there's this internal affairs guy who's giving this all kinds of shit, accusing him of killing Vinny. And I like how Lance Henriksen is just like, fuck you! And it was like, fuck me! I was like, no, fuck you! That guy was actually, I don't like this, I know a lot of people don't like me, but I'm good at my job. And you know what? You're suspect number one. I got one suspect. And if you're good at math, you know what the answer is. Just a dick. And Lance was like, can I go home? I want to go home with my family. And so he goes home, and now Max Janke is causing all kinds of crazy shit. He's, earlier before, while Lance was getting interrogated at the police precinct, Max Janke was taking advantage of that, and he was going in, he was terrorizing his wife and his kids. And, of course, there's also I also want to mention a little fun little scene that I like. And this character that this kid plays, that Aaron Eisenberg plays, Scott McCarthy. He's a metalhead, and he's just totally 80s. Like, this character that he plays is one thing that dates the film a little bit, because he's wearing cutoff shirts, he's got the Walkman, and there's one scene where his sister, Deedee Pfieffer, Bonnie, comes in because she's trying to find Vinny, and he comes and asks her for help, and he's listening to his Metallica while he's laying on his bed, and she touches him, to get his attention. He's like, ah! And he's like, don't ever sneak up on a man while he's listening to Metallica. And anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I had fun with that line. Anyway, so, they go look for Vinny, and they're trying not to get caught by their dad, and then they hear Lance Henriksen goes down into the basement, and then he hears Max Janke's voice taunting him, and he's all like, stay away from my family! Stay the fuck away! And you stay away from her! Stay away from my daughter, you fuck! And then he gets back up the stairs, and then he finds his kids. He's like, what are you doing up? And so then, that kind of ties in the whole thing where they believe that he saw Vinny down there and killed him, because they find Vinny's body later. So you can see why the cops might be thinking what they're thinking. And, his life is all going to hell now. And so he's in this interrogation thing. His family's getting terrorized by Brion James at that moment. And I think his wife pretty much it's insinuated that she's raped by Brion James. And then his daughter insinuating that she might have been raped too. It's really messed up. And so then you don't actually see it, but it's insinuated. So what happens is he goes back home and he sees this sort of illusion sort of stuff that's really messing him, messing with his head. Like finds his son and the headphones have burned, onto his head and he's dead now. And then he goes in and finds his daughter, and she's got this. She's on this bed and she's like, "Help me, Daddy, help me!" And Lance was like, "What's going on, honey? What?" And she lifts up her sheet and lifts up her shirt, and she's pregnant. But really, what it is, it's the head of Max Janky in a really unsettling, really well done makeup effect. His head pushes through, and then she's like, "Help me!" And then he's got the gun pointed at her, and he's like, "No, no!" And then this imprint of the cleaver, which he had in a dream earlier, which is insinuated that could be stigmata, which is an interesting sort of aspect to the plot. He starts ripping it, he's trying to rip his chest open, but that's a very brief scene. But that's the scene that's a lot longer, a lot more detailed. But even that scene is not available in this version, or even not, especially not in the R-rated version, the theatrical version. And this is actually even more in depth. And this is another scene where there's a picture of it on the Japanese VHS cover art, the Japanese VHS cover art, where he opens his chest and he opens it even wider, and he actually pulls his heart out. This scene was shot, but it was put on the cutting room floor thanks to those assholes at the Motion Picture Association of America. So anyway, this is that was cut out, so that's why you see weird cuts where he's got blood on his hands, and the next shot he doesn't because of the stupid MPAA. So it's not necessarily choppy, bad editing because the movie was just being bad with editing. It was because the MPAA asked them to cut out a scene, which would make it almost impossible for you not to have something like that if you cut it out. So then he's weakened now. He's freaked out. He goes in the dining room, sees all these people, sees his family dead. Sees his daughter there and his son. They're and all this crazy stuff. Here's Jakey laughing at his ass. And he ends up somehow following him into his spirit world, where he's taken his wife. And this is sort of basically the spirit world is like a recreation of the foundry or the electric plant in the kitchen area where he caught him, and where he caught Max Janky in the real world. And he then meets up with the severed head of Peter Campbell's character played by Thom Bray. And Thom Bray earlier actually met up with Lance Henriksen's character and explained to him what, you gotta listen to me. I have a theory. You could kill him, with electric energy. You just gotta fry him with electricity and then bring him back into the real world and then blow his ass away. And it's his severed head. You see a severed head on a table on the plate that says Blue Plate Special and blood next to it, which was a reference to the earlier scene in the film. And he tells Lance Henriksen, "You gotta do it, you gotta find a way to fry him. And you can kill him finally. Bring him into this world and kill him." And then his head just explodes out of fucking nowhere. And then he goes in and Lance chases after Brion James, tries to get his wife back. He ends up she ends up elbowing Brion James to get away from him. Lance Henriksen and Brion James get a little bit of fight. There's a little bit of extra stuff that's in this version that's not our R-rated version. There's one more shot of Lance Henriksen's head bouncing off the rail. And one shot of when Brion James punches Lance Henriksen. There's like a spray of blood that pours out of his mouth. And so they get a little fisticuff. And Lance Henriksen ends up throwing Brion James' ass off the edge of the railing. Goes after to get his wife back, tells her to turn on the electricity, the switches and everything, so they can electrocute his ass. The last line of dialogue that Brion James' character has is pretty much, he smacks his wife around like a rag doll and says, "Back the fuck off, bitch!" And, so what happens is he, with the help of his wife, ends up electrocuting him. And, he's like, "No, actually, those aren't really his last words." Yeah, those are his last words. "Back the fuck off, you bitch!" Like, no, no, get the fuck away from me. Yeah, they put this plank in there and electrocute him. Ah! And it actually brings him back into the real world. And then a really awesome, badass scene. Like I said, he gets brought back in the real world. Lance Henriksen brings up the gun. He's like, fuck you. And then just shoots him like 5 times, 6 times, unloads his entire clip into his ass. And that's another scene that is more bloody in this version because when he unloads the clip into him, he can be Max can be seen with his bloody shooting holes, where the bullets have gone through, and that's not in the R-rated theatrical cut. So, and it does make it even more impactful. And the movie pretty much ends it with Max is finally dead again. He's dead for good now, and Lance Henriksen and his family move out. Then he end with this song that I didn't mind called "The Things That I Have Done to Our Love," written by Leslie Boehm and David Kendrick, and performed by the Gleaming Spires. And I really did enjoy that, and I like that song pretty. It's a nice bit of music. That's a horror show, and I think it's a very underrated, unheralded. 4.8 out of 10 on IMDb is way too low. It gets a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is bullshit. Some of the criticisms it got, Roger Ebert gave it 1 out of 4 stars. The New York Times wrote, horror show builds up a good head of suspense, then squanders it in mechanical, poorly staged splatter. I disagree. It's not mechanical. It's not poorly staged. It looks fine. And it just adds into the whole haunted house aspect of the film, because the whole idea is the serial killer dies and then he haunts the home of the cop who caught him, which is actually a pretty good idea. And I thought the film did a really good job with that. All movie wrote, the film consists of long periods of tedium punctuated by outbursts of graphic gore and surreal effects. I was not bored at all. The only little bit that I was tired is because I was watching this at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and that was just normal, tiredness. It wasn't because the movie was making me tired. I thought it was fast paced. I thought it went by at a quick pace. I thought it really kept my interest. I really loved Lance Henriksen's character. Great performance by Lance Henriksen. I would probably say my favorite Lance Henriksen film, and where he's the lead. And favorite Brion James film. He's really great in this as Max Janke. And so, some really solid editing. The way they did the flashbacks I thought was really well done. The transitions, cinematography is really solid. It's a very underrated movie that does not deserve nearly as much crap as it gets. I mean, if you're a fan of horror films, give the horror show a look sometime. You might not enjoy it as much as I did, but who knows? I mean, this is definitely a movie that should be rediscovered and shouldn't be as overlooked as it is. And it's really too bad. And if you can, try to find this version, which I know is going to be hard because it's not available in the U.S., United States. But I really don't know what to say about the horror show, except I really enjoyed the film, and I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it yet. I'd include clips. It'd probably get blocked by MGM. But anyway, MGM, you're a bunch of assholes, and MPAA, you already know what you are. And I really don't know what to say about horror show, except if you're rated out of 5 stars, give 4.5. 4.5 because there's one little thing. The rules of the spirit world versus the real world are not very explained very well. You really don't know how Lance Henriksen followed or Brion James into the spirit world. He just says, "Welcome to the other side." It's about all you really hear. An explanation for that, and then the whole sort of stuff where his family is dead or they're not. You guess it's an illusion, but at the same time, I don't know what's going on. And then the ending, you have a sort of thing where he's convicted of a crime, he's convicted of murder, he's the number one suspect, and then the end of the movie, he's moving away. And of course, pretty much if he's allowed to move away out of his house, he's not convicted of murder anymore. But I just think it would have been nice to add a little bit of validation, like have his police chief friend come in and actually, see Janke's dead again. He trusts his friend after he knocked him out, Lance Henriksen. So he gets up after he got knocked out, gets the cops to go back to his house because he feels that something's wrong. Goes back to Lance's house, and then the cops arrive just in time to see Lance Henriksen, after he just shot Max Janke and killed him again. And then you can have maybe a fun line of dialogue where, oh my God, it's Max Janke. I thought he was dead. Was. I thought, that's Max Janke. He's alive. He's alive? Was alive. Now he's dead. Now the fucker's dead. Something like that, that kind of thing. I don't know the exact line of dialogue I would use, but that would be nice. The little bit of validation would have helped, because it tied up a little bit of the ending, because you have the whole thing, he's the number one suspect, and now it's kind of like, it's all thrown out. But really, there's not enough evidence to really show that it should be thrown out. That's the thing. The only person that's a witness to Max Janke dying again is his family and him. So it's kind of like there's really not enough evidence to rule him out of the murder of Vinny or the murder of the Campbell guy. So it really should have, I think it would have helped a little bit to have that validation at the end. He's alive? Was. Now he's fucking dead. Now the fucker's dead. So, kind of thing. But anyway, I really don't know what to say about Horror Show other than those. I don't really have any other really big issues with the Horror Show other than those two sort of things. It's kind of confusing about how the spirit world works versus the real world in this movie, what it's able to do and what it's not able to do, and then also a little bit of the sort of ending. He gets off a little bit too easy, like move away, and it is what it is. But those are really tiny nitpicks, and they only bring it down a half a star for me. And there is a little teensy bit of pacing, like in the middle, like a little bit, but not a lot. Teensy bit of pacing issues in the middle of the film, and that's about it. But anyway, I really don't know what to say about Horror Show. I know it's a long review, but I think it's an underrated movie. It deserves it. So anyway, except thanks for watching my review of the Horror Show, and I will see you guys later. See ya.